Our next speaker is Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group, which looks at political risk. And Ian has most recently written many books, but most recently, Every Nation for Itself, Winners and Losers in a G0 World. So Ian, please come and give your prediction for 2013.
Good afternoon, all. I think if we think about 2012, there have really been three things that have been going on, and I'll talk about 2013. First, China has been rising. Second, the Middle East has been exploding. And third, Europe has been muddling through. To put that a little more briefly, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If I think about 2013, the things are largely similar. The order is a little different. I think in 2013 we will increasingly understand that Europe's muddle through has an endpoint. Europe will be putting a floor under the crisis. We will see that a banking union is in place. We will no longer have economist covers that show the euro in imminent implosion or meltdown, as has been the case over 2012. It'll be a more comfortable environment for Europe. Doesn't mean they're growing like crazy, but that's not an explosion. It's indeed better governance over time. We'll see a solution. In the case of the Middle East, it will continue to explode. It will explode frankly, to a greater degree, and it will have a greater impact on so many of the nations, of the peoples of that region of the world. China will continue to rise. But while China's rise over the past 4 years has been a matter of, thank God, given the economic implosion, given the Great Recession, that we have Chinese growth, that without it, the United States, Europe, developing economies around the world would do so much worse, that as the United States is recovering from this Great Recession, we will increasingly see China's continued rise as a threat, as a challenge, particularly to our allies in the region, especially Japan, but also in terms of the global economy. So for 2013, the good will be Europe having increasingly muddled through, the bad, the Middle East continuing to explode, and the ugly, China rising. That's what I think about 2013. I'm looking forward to chatting with you all.
Okay, well, let's take that notion of China rising being the ugly. Why is that necessarily ugly? I mean, it's difficult, and there's a big adjustment to happen to it, but it's natural given China's size, right? That it should be a rising power. Why should that be seen as an ugly thing? Just a difficult thing, but.
Well, I think ugly in terms of concerns about the implications that's going to have for global peace and stability. I don't think the world should have a problem with China rising, but it is not the rise of the rest. It's the rise of the different. We now know what China's leadership will look like when they become the largest economy in the world. They will not look more like us. They will be a state capitalist economy. They will be an authoritarian political system. They will be poor. Being different does not mean they're worse, but we don't tend to like different.
But it's
we don't
a different
do well
sort of rise from, for example, the Soviet Union, which was an ideological proselytizer around the world, and China is not quite that sort of power, is it?
Oh, no, that's true. But historically, when you think about the relationship the U.S. has had with China, it's not like we've tried to particularly understand China, but they needed our investment dollars. And so they had to join our institutions. It was our way or the highway. All of the global institutions out there, the WTO, the World Bank, the United Nations, the IMF, Bretton Woods Accord, they're all created by the United States. I mean, they sound global. World Bank sounds global, right? World Series sounds global. There's a Canadian team. It's not global. And we, maybe you should say we should care as Americans, but we didn't really care because it was our way or the highway. Well, that's no longer going to be perceived as true. We as Americans will have a hard time with it. Some of our allies in the region, particularly the Japanese, who have taken a lot of direct investment exposure, will have an enormously hard time with it. Of course, their exports to China way down. And the Chinese no longer need the Japanese the way they used to. They can get their technology from South Korea, Taiwan. They can get their money from other places. They don't need it. So I think it's not that it should be a problem. It's that it will be a problem.
So a crucial person to watch next year will be Xi Jinping, the new Chinese leader. What do you make of him? Do you have a sense of what he is going to want to do on the world stage?
No, I don't. And neither does anyone else. He is.
Do you think he does of himself?
Well, I think that what we're seeing from China, I think they understand that what is dangerous for the Chinese government is information. Information in the hands of lots of increasingly wealthy Chinese that are empowered with the internet. Information in the hands of the New York Times saying Wen Jiaobao's family is worth $2.7 billion. And I think that if you're China, the response to that is government by consensus at the top. You do not want to have another Bo Xilai episode. And so I think Xi Jinping is not a strong individual leader. I think what we have is a group of 7 in the Standing Committee of the Chinese Communist Party who will engage in very incremental shifts in policymaking. They are all reformers. There's been this question of, well, in China, we've got reformers and then we've got conservatives. Not true. I think all 7 of these are reformers. But they're not reformers the way we want them to be reformers. They do want to improve the social safety net in China, all of them. And they do want to see more redistribution of wealth. But they are not interested in liberal democratic reform. They are not interested in free market reform. They're not going to create a free market economy in China. And we have not yet gotten our hands around that. So
the response to this in 2013, the Obama administration had this well-known pivot, so-called pivot, towards Asia. In its first term. What happens to the pivot in second term Obama? Well, you know, there's a large number of officials, American officials, that in the yesterday were in Bahrain. And they were reassuring the Bahraini people that the American pivot was not away from the Middle East. And then they all left Bahrain, which I thought was appropriate. The American pivot towards Asia is real. The U.S. will absolutely focus much more on Asia. Obama referred to China as an adversary for the first time in the third policy debate, the foreign policy debate. How many of you saw the foreign policy debate? Show of hands. Yeah, you're not getting those 50 hour and a half back, right? That's gone. That time is gone. We apologize. It's very clear that Obama didn't want to talk about foreign policy, but to the extent that he did, the China issue, of course, was playing very heavily. In the Middle East, it's seen as a challenge, but if America is going to be the world's largest producer of oil by 2020, according to the International Energy Agency, self-sufficient by 2030 or 35, the Middle East is going to matter more or less to us. Less. China is going to become the world's largest economy. Our allies in Asia are begging us to play a bigger role there. We have not begun to see the importance of the pivot in Asia yet. It is coming. Okay, let's have some questions from the audience. Who would like to ask a question? There's a couple at the front here.
Hi. So I was in China a few years ago, my one and only visit. But the thing that really amazed me is the duality of the country, the desire to innovate and create entrepreneurs and support that part of their society, but then at the same time, this overbearing government. And, you know, I walked away thinking, at the time there was double-digit growth, I walked away thinking this can't continue. It's going to implode. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great question. I think that the challenge that you refer to is the fact that China is increasingly not one country. It's 2 countries. If you look in Shanghai, people make $20,000 a year. The average citizen of Shanghai, their interest in what they want from the government is not 10% growth. They want accountability. They want more transparency. They want quality of life. They want rule of law. But, you know, more than half of China's citizens are not on the internet. And they don't live like they do in Shanghai. They live in the interior, and they want double-digit growth. They want refrigerators. They want cars. They want the opportunity for their kids to do better. And one thing, if we have learned anything from the new Chinese leadership. It's that they are not going to show two different kinds of government for the two different countries in China. They are not going to engage in experimental political and economic reform on the coasts of their country. And that absolutely should worry us in terms of the ability for the Chinese government to transform itself over the coming years.
Who else would like to? Yeah, right at the front here. And then after that.
Do you see some sort of military altercation in the South China Sea sooner or later?
Military altercation, there's always the possibility with contested territories, lots of military exercises. The Chinese telling the Vietnamese last week, you've got to stop exploring, energy exploration in an area that you consider your own. Is there a possibility that you might see a couple of ships actually firing on each other? Sure. Do I think that we're going to see war in the region? I do not. I think the danger is that we have countries that are economically interdependent that will increasingly be fighting economically against each other and engaging in cyber warfare. Philippine banks just in the last few weeks have started saying publicly that the cyber attacks against them are causing massive trouble. They don't like to say that because it hurts the shareholders. If they're saying it, it means it's getting bad. So, we used to think about countries as enemies or as friends. Across Asia, you're increasingly thinking about countries as frenemies that can have economic interdependence, but will be fighting at the same time, and the economic implications of that fight is quite serious.
There was in the middle there, lady in the middle.
Thank you. You mentioned Middle East. Do you think that your prediction about the Middle East will explode more? Is it for the better or the worse? My question is we've been waiting for the status quo to change in the Middle East for years. Sometimes you need to go to the end of the tunnel to see the light. Are we still there? Are we going to see peace? Are we going to see two countries there? That's my first question. Second question, within all the changes in the Middle East, are we going to see some changes in the border of some countries? As you know, the Kurds has been struggling to have their own country for years. Do you think in 2013 they will have a country called Kurdistan finally?
No, I don't. But I do think that you're going to see increasingly areas of countries that will be less governable by the states that represent them. And that won't just be true in Syria, though that's obviously true in Syria. It'll be true in Iraq. It'll be true in Lebanon. Look, the Qatari foreign minister came out just yesterday and said, if you could just resolve the Israeli-Palestinian problem, then you can fix everything in the Middle East. Well, first of all, okay, if you can just cure cancer, then things will go, right? It's hard, but it's also not just about Israel and Palestine. The sectarianism is a real problem in the Middle East. And I'm not someone who's trying to say that, if the U.S. were just willing to do more, then life will get better. The U.S. has, showed that it's capable of making mistakes, left, right, and center in the Middle East. But the U.S.'s absence will not be replaced by anyone else. My concept for where the world is today is not a G7 or a G20, but a G0, where we do not have global leadership. And you see this in Syria today. Syria is the poster child for the G0. How many more Syrians need to die before steps are taken to remove Assad and his regime, or at least keep these guys from killing each other? The Americans, the UN, NATO, all came out in the last week and said there is a red line that if the Syrians use chemical weapons against their people, we're not going to tolerate that. So apparently, short of that, we are. What message is that sending to you about the Middle East? It's not a message I want to hear repeated.
What about the first part of the question, which I thought was a good one? This is, in your typology, is upheaval in the Middle East good or bad? Where does that belong? Because you don't necessarily want status quo.
You don't necessarily want status quo. A place like Egypt, you could make the argument that it's actually an improvement. I certainly think that Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood are more reflective of the Egyptian people than Mubarak was, especially with the military still playing a role. but we will see where Egypt goes. It's a very dicey situation. You can overreach. I think that the status quo is going to be shaken up across the Middle East over the next 12 months. But to what extent that is, I think that the light at the end of that tunnel is not 2014. It's a long time coming, and it's likely to get considerably more dangerous and fractious before it gets better.
We're out of time, but I want to ask you one more question. If there was one bit of leadership that the United States should take, you're saying that shortage of leadership would be the characterization of the world we're entering into. What would that leadership be?
Well, in the absence of US-led global institutions, we will not see those anymore. What you will see is either global institutions that aren't led, or you'll see institutions that aren't global, that are run by countries, and some of those should be run by the United States. I think what the US should do is do its damnedest to create and run a coalition of the willing economically. That doesn't just mean the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but a Transatlantic Partnership. By far, the two most important countries for the US in the world to make that happen are Japan and Germany. And the US will need to recognize that traditional special relationships with Great Britain, with Israel, have much less relevance for the US and for the world than they have had historically. Bureaucracy and entrenched policies make it very hard to make that shift quickly. But I find it very interesting. You look at China. The Chinese don't have the ability to have relations with everyone. They don't have the diplomats. They don't have the experience. When the Chinese go to Europe, they basically do one thing. They go to Germany. And then they go to Germany again. And they keep going to Germany because the Chinese understand that that's where decisions and leadership actually reside. The Americans
I was wondering why I hadn't seen any Chinese lately.
That's why. I think that's what we need to do. I think that's what we need to do.
Ian Bremmer, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. My pleasure.